The evening light spilled through the kitchen window, pale and cold against the unwashed dishes. I was 7 months pregnant, standing barefoot on the faded tiles, humming to my baby when I noticed it. The empty space on Ethan's hand. His wedding ring was gone. For a moment, I thought he must have taken it off while cooking, or maybe left it on the nightstand. But then he looked up from his phone, and the lie was already forming behind his smile. "It's at Cartier," he said casually, flipping his iPhone face down on the table. "Just getting it cleaned, for the holidays." His voice was smooth, too smooth. My heart pressed hard against my ribs, searching for truth in his eyes. I wanted to believe him. Wanted so badly to protect the little world I'd built around this man. The same man who'd kissed my growing belly just last week, whispering we'd name the baby Aaron if it was a boy. But then his phone buzzed again. He grabbed it quickly, said it was work, and headed for the door. The air smelled faintly of Dior Sauvage as it closed behind him. I stood there for a long time, the silence ringing louder than any argument. When I reached for his jacket to hang it up, a small slip of paper fell from the pocket. My heart stopped. A pawn ticket. 14K men's band, sold. Date, 2 days ago. The world went still. My fingers shook as I stared at the proof that the symbol of our marriage, the promise on his hand, had been traded for cash. For what? For who? I pressed a trembling hand to my belly, whispering, "It's just you and me, baby. We'll be okay." Outside, sirens wailed somewhere down Steinway Street. I felt like one of them, broken, crying out into the night, unheard. When Ethan came home hours later, I forced a smile. He carried a glossy Dior shopping bag, the kind that came from Fifth Avenue boutiques I could never afford. "What's that?" I asked. He grinned, hiding exhaustion behind charm. "A client gift, agency stuff, don't touch." He set the bag on the counter and walked away to shower. The scent of hotel soap and guilt followed him down the hall. I waited until the water ran before I peeked inside. Inside the bag was a small velvet box, Tiffany blue. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside wasn't my ring. It was a diamond bracelet, thin and glittering, delicate as deceit. A tag still clung to the clasp, for S. Vaughn, with love. My chest went cold. Sabrina Vaughn. I'd seen her before. One of those influencers who posted photos in hotel robes at the Ritz-Carlton, holding champagne glasses like trophies. She tagged Ethan in a few brand collabs, calling him her creative director. I thought it was business. God, I was blind. I placed the bracelet back inside the box, carefully as if touching fire. My reflection in the kitchen window looked like someone else. Someone smaller, paler, trapped. The baby kicked hard, almost like a warning. I whispered, "We deserve better." That night, I couldn't sleep. Ethan's soft snores filled the room, but I couldn't unsee the pawn ticket. I took a photo of it and sent it to my best friend, Mia, a nurse at the hospital. She called immediately, her voice tight. "Grace, that's not cleaning, that's selling." My throat ached as I stared at Ethan's sleeping face. I knew everything would change from here. I just didn't know how much. The next morning, I decided to visit that pawn shop myself. And when I found there, shattered the last piece of hope I had left. The next morning, Manhattan was gray and damp, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. I tucked my scarf around my swollen belly and clutched the pawn ticket like it was evidence of a crime, which, in a way, it was. Ethan was still asleep when I left, his arm draped across the empty side of the bed. The N train rattled toward Midtown, its windows fogged with the breath of strangers. I tried not to cry, but every jolt of the tracks reminded me that life keeps moving, even when your heart doesn't. When I reached the pawn shop, it looked exactly how you'd imagine betrayal might. Dim light, gold chains glinting behind scratched glass, and the faint smell of metal and cheap polish. A man in a red flannel shirt stood behind the counter, polishing a watch. "Morning, ma'am," he said. "What can I help you with?" I slid the ticket across the counter. "I just need to confirm this sale." He adjusted his glasses, looked at the slip, then typed something into his computer. "Yeah," he said slowly. "That was a 14K men's band. Sold 2 days ago. Guy said he needed cash fast. Tall, light hair, maybe early 30s. Nice watch, though. Rolex Submariner, if I remember right." My breath hitched. Ethan didn't just sell his ring. He flaunted the Rolex he'd bought himself last year, a symbol of success he couldn't actually afford. "Do you know what he used the money for?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would cut deeper than the question. The man shrugged. Didn't say. People rarely do. Outside, the cold wind hit me full in the face, sharp and punishing. I stared at the city, the traffic, the honking, the glittering windows of Fifth Avenue, and realized how invisible heartbreak is in New York. You could be falling apart, and no one would notice. I walked past a Tiffany display, diamond rings sparkling behind glass. My reflection was layered over them, a pregnant woman with tired eyes, a wedding finger bare. At a Starbucks on the corner, I ordered a latte just to have something warm to hold. The barista smiled kindly when I fumbled my card. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I sat near the window, phone buzzing on the table. Ethan had texted, "Don't forget to buy diapers. I'll be late tonight. Client meeting." I almost laughed. My husband could sell our wedding ring for another woman's gift and still remind me to buy diapers. A few blocks away was his office building, a sleek glass tower overlooking Bryant Park. I'd been there once for a holiday party, all marble floors and fake smiles. I didn't plan to go inside. But something inside me, rage, maybe courage, made my feet move anyway. When I reached the lobby, my heart was pounding so loud I could hear it echoing. Through the glass wall of the cafe inside, I saw him, Ethan, laughing, sitting across from a woman with glossy brown hair and red nails tapping her phone. Sabrina Vaughn. She was prettier in real life. Colder, too. Her laughter was a knife, soft, sharp, practiced. On her wrist glittered a rose gold bracelet I recognized instantly, the one from the Tiffany box. I pressed my hand to my belly, forcing myself to breathe. Ethan leaned close, whispering something that made her giggle. Then he looked up and saw me. For a split second, his face strained of color. Then he stood, gestured me aside, and muttered something to Sabrina. She smiled, a cat who'd found the milk. He met me in the hallway, voice tight. "Grace, this isn't what it looks like." I showed him the pawn ticket. "You sold your wedding ring." He blinked, speechless. "Why, Ethan?" I whispered. "For her?" He said nothing. Only the reflection of the bracelet flashed between us, brighter than any truth he could have told. And that was the moment I realized the man I married didn't exist anymore. Ethan texted me 2 days later, pretending everything was fine. "Let's talk. Afternoon tea at the plaza. I want to make things right." For a few hours I let myself believe him. Maybe guilt had finally caught up. Maybe he remembered I was still carrying his child. I ironed my one good dress, the blue one that still fit over my stomach, and took the subway to Fifth Avenue. The city glowed that golden New York glow, money everywhere, kindness nowhere. Inside the plaza, everything smelled of roses and old money. Waiters in white jackets glided between tables, pouring champagne for women who looked like magazine covers. I spotted Ethan near the window. He waved, smiling nervously. For a heartbeat, I saw the man I'd married. Then a familiar laugh shattered the illusion. Sabrina Vaughn stood beside him in a cream cashmere coat, hair glossy under the chandeliers. She kissed him lightly on the cheek, then noticed me. Her lips curved into a polite, poisonous smile. "Grace, right?" she said sweetly. "Ethan told me all about you." My throat went dry. I bet he did. Ethan pulled out a chair. "Sit, please. Let's not make a scene." The irony nearly made me laugh. He wanted peace now, after selling our ring, after gifting her the bracelet meant for me. I sat, hands folded on the tablecloth that probably cost more than my month's rent. He started talking about new beginnings, about forgiveness. I watched his mouth move, but my mind drifted to the baby kicking under my ribs. Then Sabrina reached into her Dior purse and pulled out her phone. "Sorry," she said, snapping a selfie. "Just documenting the moment. My followers love these plaza teas." The waiter returned, setting down a tiered tray of pastries that looked too perfect to eat. The room shimmered with laughter and silver. I wanted to vanish. Ethan cleared his throat. "So Grace, I wanted to show you something." He opened a small Tiffany box on the table. For a fleeting second, my heart lifted. Maybe he'd redeemed the ring, maybe he understood. But inside wasn't a ring, it was another bracelet, even more delicate, diamonds catching the light like tiny shards of cruelty. Ethan turned towards Sabrina, smiling. "Congratulations on your new brand deal," he said. "You deserve it." For a moment the whole room seemed to tilt. Sabrina's eyes sparkled, and she leaned forward to let him clasp the bracelet around her wrist. The sound of that clasp locking burned into my memory forever. Someone at the next table whispered, Isn't that his wife? The blood drained from my face. I stood too fast, the table shuddered and my teacup toppled, amber liquid spreading across white linen like a wound. Gasps rippled around us. Sabrina dabbed at the spill with a napkin, pretending sympathy. "Oh, honey," she said softly. "Pregnancy hormones, right?" Ethan hissed under his breath. "Grace, calm down." Calm? I had been calm for months while he lied, while he built an image with her, while I grew his child alone. My vision blurred. My fingers trembled as I set the napkin down neatly beside the broken cup. "I hope your followers enjoyed the show," I said quietly. Then I turned and walked out before tears could betray me. The marble lobby was too bright. Cameras flashed. Tourists, influencers, 1,000 strangers capturing moments they didn't understand. Outside, Fifth Avenue roared with taxis and noise. I stood on the curb, shaking, invisible in the middle of it all. My phone buzzed. A hospital email. Maternal health fundraiser tomorrow. RSVP if attending. For some reason, I clicked yes. Maybe I needed to be somewhere people fought for something real. Maybe I just needed to remember there was life beyond betrayal. As I stepped into the cold afternoon, wind stinging my cheeks, I whispered to my unborn son, "We're not done yet." Because deep down, I knew this humiliation was only the beginning, and the woman they underestimated was about to rise. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain against the window. My pillow was still damp from the night before, and my heart felt like it had been beaten raw. Ethan didn't come home. Maybe he was with her. Maybe he wasn't. Either way, it didn't matter. I had already decided I wouldn't spend another day waiting for a man who could humiliate me in front of a room full of strangers. At 9, I pulled on my maternity coat, grabbed my worn leather tote, and headed to New York Presbyterian for the hospital fundraiser. The train was crowded, a blur of umbrellas and tired faces, but it felt almost safe. No lies, no perfume, no diamonds meant for someone else. When I arrived, the community wing smelled faintly of coffee and antiseptic. Volunteers were unpacking Amazon baby care boxes, folding tiny blankets into neat stacks. My friend Mia spotted me immediately, rushing over with a clipboard and a hug that nearly broke me. "Grace," she whispered. "You came." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. I needed to remember what good looks like. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. My bare finger told the story for me. We started sorting donations, laughing softly over the chaos of mismatched bottles and pacifiers. For a moment, I forgot the world outside. Then a calm, unfamiliar voice spoke behind me. "Excuse me, are you the coordinator?" I turned. A tall man in a navy suit stood in the doorway, rain still glittering on his shoulders. He wasn't the type you meet in hospital basements. Everything about him was composed, the quiet authority, the silver watch, the steadiness in his eyes. "I'm not," I said, "just volunteering." He smiled faintly. "You look like you run the place." I felt my cheeks warm. "Hardly. I just make sure the right things go to the right moms." He nodded, glancing around the room where nurses, young mothers, and elderly volunteers worked side by side. "That's leadership," he said simply. Mia stepped closer, whispering to me as he walked off to speak with administrators. "That's Daniel Whitmore. You know, the Whitmore. The tech billionaire who funds half the city's outreach programs." I blinked, remembering the name from news headlines. Whitmore Systems, one of those companies that powered everything you didn't see. Later, as I carried boxes down the hall, I saw him again, this time talking to a teenage mom who was crying because her baby's father had left. Daniel knelt beside her, not as a savior, but as someone listening. His patience filled the space like sunlight after a storm. When the girl left, he noticed me standing there. "You work here?" he asked. "I used to," I said softly. "Before things got complicated." He didn't pry. He simply offered me a bottle of water from the table and said, "The world would be easier if more people had your steadiness." For a moment, I couldn't speak. No one had called me steady in weeks. We spent the next hour labeling supplies. He signed a donation form with a Mont Blanc pen, his handwriting clean and deliberate. I caught him glancing at my belly once, not with pity but concern. When it was over, he extended his card. "If you ever want to return to the hospital program, we're expanding partnerships. I could use your kind of clarity." I hesitated, the weight of betrayal still heavy. "I don't think anyone needs me right now." He met my eyes, steady and kind. "That's where you're wrong, Mrs. Cole. People need people who've survived something." I swallowed hard. For the first time in a long while, someone had looked at me and seen more than a broken wife. And as I stepped out into the rain, I felt the smallest spark of something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. The warmth from the hospital lingered with me for a day, like sunlight trapped under my skin. But when I walked into our apartment that night, reality waited. Dim lights, unpaid bills, and Ethan sitting at the table, staring at his laptop with the intensity of a man watching his own ship sink. He didn't look up when I entered. "Did you buy diapers?" he asked flatly. I ignored the question. "We need to talk." "Not now, Grace," he said, typing faster. "I'm closing a deal. This client could change everything." The word client made me flinch. I'd heard it before, his favorite excuse, as if betrayal could be dressed up in business jargon. I set my tote down. "You mean Sabrina?" That got his attention. His fingers froze. "What are you talking about?" "I saw the bracelet. I saw her. You gave her my life in a blue box." He stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. "You went through my things?" "I went through the ruins," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. "You don't understand how much pressure I'm under. I've got debts, Grace, credit cards, business loans. Sabrina just helps me connect to investors." I almost laughed. "By selling your wedding ring?" He ran a hand through his hair. "It was temporary. I'll buy another one." My stomach turned. "You can't buy vows back, Ethan." He looked at me like I was speaking another language. "You've never had to worry about image," he snapped. "In my field, perception is everything. Sabrina gets that. You don't." I stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. "You're worried about perception while your wife is 7 months pregnant and wondering how to pay rent?" His eyes darted toward a stack of envelopes on the counter, credit statements, all unopened. I reached for one, tore it open, and felt blood drain from my face. "Ethan, these are months overdue." He snatched the paper from my hand. "I'll handle it." "You can't even handle honesty." He slammed his fist on the table. "Don't start with me when you don't know what it's like to carry everything." I stepped back, heart racing. "I'm the one carrying everything, Ethan." I touched my stomach. Literally. Silence filled the room, thick and sharp. He turned away, muttering something about big opportunities and just needing a little more time. The next morning, I noticed his Rolex was gone. So was his laptop. On the kitchen counter sat a note. "Out of town for a few days. Don't worry, I'll fix this." Mia came over later with groceries, took one look at my face, and didn't ask questions. She made soup while I sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from me. "You can't fix a man who keeps breaking himself," she said gently. A week passed. No word from Ethan. Then his mother called, her voice trembling. "Grace, I saw something online. Is Ethan involved with that girl again? The one who posts those hotel photos?" I didn't have to answer. Silence spoke for me. When I hung up, I opened our shared bank account. The balance made my stomach drop. Almost everything was gone. Rent money, baby fund, savings. That night, I sat by the window with my hands around a cup of tea gone cold. The city lights blurred into streaks, each one a lie he'd told. I reached for my notebook and wrote 3 words across a blank page. "Protect the baby." That was all that mattered now. Not the ring, not the debt. Not the man who sold both. Because somewhere between love and betrayal, I realized survival was my new vow. And I intended to keep it. The following week, the world felt heavier. Like New York itself was pressing down on my shoulders. My belly had grown round and firm. Every step reminded me that time was running out, and so was my patience. Ethan still hadn't come home. His texts had dwindled into excuses. Meetings, deadlines, clients, always the same lies, dressed differently. Tuesday morning, I went for my prenatal checkup alone. The clinic sat on Park Avenue, bright and sterile, its glass walls looking out at the skyline that glittered with everything my marriage wasn't. A nurse named Caroline helped me onto the table. "Let's see how your little guy's doing," she said, smiling. When the ultrasound wand touched my skin, the sound filled the room. A steady, galloping heartbeat. Tears stunned my eyes. My son's heartbeat was the only truth I could trust anymore. "He's strong," Caroline said. "Perfect heartbeat." I nodded, wiping tears with the edge of the paper sheet. "He's stronger than both of us." After the appointment, I stepped outside into the chill. A delivery van screeched to a stop beside me, the driver setting an Amazon box on the curb. My name wasn't on it, but I still bent down to check the label before returning it. As the driver thanked me and drove off, I thought, packages always find their right address. Maybe truth does too. At home, I opened Ethan's MacBook. It was still synced to our shared iCloud. I hesitated, then clicked on his email. Receipts, transfers, messages. My stomach twisted. Payments labeled Consulting S. Vaughn. Dozens of them, some for thousands. Attached invoices described content development, branding, shoot coordination. Lies stacked like dominoes. My hands trembled as I took screenshots, sending them to Aunt Patricia, my late father's sister, a lawyer in Newark who had always told me to keep proof, not pride. Within minutes, she called. "Grace," she said calmly, "don't confront him yet. Document everything. We'll protect you and the baby legally." I stared out the window, watching the sky shift from silver to gray. "I don't even know who I married anymore." "You'll find out in court," she said, "and he won't like the answer." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, the apartment too quiet, the city too loud. I thought of the girl in the hospital crying because her boyfriend left her, and how Daniel Whitmore had knelt beside her, listening. He'd said people need those who survive something. Maybe that was the beginning of my survival. The next morning, my phone buzzed again, this time a notification from Instagram. Sabrina had posted a photo of her and Ethan at a rooftop bar, glasses clinking against the Manhattan skyline. The caption read, "Choose joy." My vision blurred. I saved the photo anyway. Evidence. Every word, every smile, every stolen moment, they'd all pay for it later. Then, out of nowhere, another message appeared. Unknown number. "Grace, it's Daniel Whitmore. I got your contact from Mia. I hope I'm not overstepping. Are you safe?" For a long time I stared at the screen, unsure if I should reply. Why would a billionaire care about a pregnant woman whose husband betrayed her? But his message didn't feel like pity. It felt like concern, simple, human concern. Finally I typed back, "I'm managing. Thank you for asking." A minute later, "If you ever need a safe place to think, my office doors are open. No agenda." I didn't reply, but for the first time in weeks I felt a strange calm, like someone had built a bridge between my chaos and a place called safety. I looked down at my belly, at the little ripple beneath my hand. "It's you and me, baby," I whispered. "And maybe, just maybe, there's still good people left in this world." But deep down, I knew, one day soon, Ethan's web of lies would collapse, and I would be standing exactly where he didn't expect, free. 2 days passed before I gathered enough courage to respond to Daniel Whitmore's offer. I stared at his text for hours, my thumb hovering over the screen. The words "safe place" echoed in my head like a promise I didn't deserve. Finally, I typed, "Thank you. Maybe a short talk could help." His reply came quickly, calm and precise. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Whitmore Systems, Park Avenue. I'll have my assistant meet you downstairs." That night, I barely slept. I stood in front of the mirror, wondering what a billionaire's office even looked like, and what he'd think of a pregnant woman with dark circles and a heart full of cracks. But the next morning, I went anyway. I owed it to my son to explore every door that opened with kindness. Whitmore Systems rose like a glass cathedral above the city, its mirrored windows reflecting the clouds. Inside, everything was quiet, polished marble, the hum of elevators, the faint smell of espresso and paper. Daniel's assistant, a poised woman named Claire, greeted me with a gentle smile. "Mr. Whitmore's expecting you." When I stepped into his office, I was surprised. It wasn't cold or ostentatious. There were no gold fixtures, no trophies, just warm wood, soft lighting, and a wall of windows overlooking Central Park. On his desk sat a single item, a silver frame holding an old photo of a young woman with kind eyes. Daniel stood by the window, hands in his pockets. "Grace," he said, smiling softly, "thank you for coming." I nodded, clutching my tote like armor. "I'm sorry to bother you. You're not bothering me," he interrupted gently. "Sit, please." I lowered myself into the chair, my heart beat quick. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Mia told me you've been helping at the hospital for years. I read the program notes. You helped raise funding for single mothers even before all this, didn't you?" I looked down. Just small things. I thought if I could make someone else's life easier, maybe mine would make more sense. "That's not small," he said. "That's the kind of work that keeps the world from breaking." His words hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened. "Mr. Whitmore, I appreciate the kindness, but I'm not sure why you'd help me. You don't even know me." He studied me for a long moment. Maybe I see a little of someone I once knew, he said quietly. My sister died giving birth years ago. She was young and scared, and the system failed her. I promised myself I'd build something that didn't. The silence between us was heavy but warm. He opened a leather folder on the desk. I have a small foundation that offers legal and financial support to mothers in difficult situations, separate from my company. No publicity, no strings. If you'd like, my legal team can help secure your rights before your husband's choices make things worse. I blinked. Legal team? Contracts, custody, financial protection, he explained. You don't have to sign anything today. Just know that you're not cornered. Part of me wanted to refuse, to cling to independence, to pride. But then I thought of the empty bank account, the bills, the baby. Why would you do this for me? I whispered. He smiled faintly. Because sometimes helping one person is the only way to sleep at night. When our meeting ended, he handed me a plain business card, no logo, just his name and a number. For emergencies, he said. I walked out into the cold sunlight, the city roaring beneath me. For the first time in months, I felt something other than fear. But I also knew. When Ethan discovered I'd found help, his mask would finally crack, and the storm I'd been bracing for would begin. A week after meeting Daniel, things in my life settled into a fragile rhythm. Morning walks, doctor visits, long silences at home. Ethan still hadn't asked where I'd been spending my days, too busy pretending his world wasn't collapsing. Then, one evening, while I was folding baby clothes on the couch, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Hi Grace, it's Sabrina. I think we should talk. There's an event tomorrow night, the Women in Business Gala at the Ritz-Carlton. Let's end all this tension. No drama, just peace. My pulse jumped. The last person I wanted to see was the woman who wore my husband's betrayal on her wrist. But something about her wording felt calculated. No drama. Sabrina never did anything without cameras nearby. When Ethan came home later, I showed him the text. He barely blinked. You should go, he said. I frowned. Why would I? Because it'll prove you're not bitter, he said, straightening his tie. People talk. My clients follow her. You showing up makes us look normal. Normal. The word stung. You mean it makes you look clean? He ignored the jab, scrolling through his phone. I'll pick you up at 7. The next evening, I stood in front of the mirror, my rented black dress hugging my growing belly. My reflection looked like a stranger, tired but steady. I slipped Patricia's silver pen into my clutch, a small reminder that truth would have its turn. Outside, Ethan waited in a borrowed Mercedes S-Class, impatience written across his face. He didn't offer to open the door. The ride was quiet, except for the hum of traffic. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom shimmered like a dream I didn't belong to. Chandeliers, champagne, the soft murmur of expensive perfume. Sabrina was already there, radiant in red, surrounded by photographers. When she spotted us, her smile widened like a trap snapping shut. Grace, she exclaimed, kissing the air beside my cheek. You look glowing. Pregnancy does that, I said flatly. Ethan moved toward the bar, pretending none of it was awkward. Sabrina looped her arm through mine, guiding me toward the stage. I wanted to apologize, she purred. Things got messy. But I really admire strong women who keep their composure. I studied her face, the perfection cracking just slightly under the lights. Strong women don't need validation from people who break families, I said softly. Her smile twitched. Oh darling, it's just business. Before I could respond, the host's voice boomed over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guests joining the gala tonight, Mr. Daniel Whitmore and the Whitmore Foundation. The room shifted, cameras flashing as Daniel entered in a tailored black suit. He spotted me almost instantly, his expression unreadable but kind. Ethan stiffened near the bar, recognition dawning on his face. Sabrina's confidence faltered. You know him? She whispered. Apparently, I said, my heart pounding. Daniel shook hands with the organizers, then glanced my way, nodding once, a quiet reassurance. The host announced that Whitmore's foundation would be unveiling a surprise contribution that evening. Whispers spread like electricity. Ethan returned, his jaw tight. You didn't tell me you knew him, he hissed. You didn't ask, I said, meeting his glare. The night pressed on, music swelling, lights glittering across champagne glasses. But something in the air had changed. Sabrina fidgeting, Ethan sweating, Daniel calm as a tide about to rise. I didn't know what he was planning, but I sensed it would expose everything they'd tried to hide. And when the lights dimmed and Daniel stepped toward the microphone, I realized the game had just turned, and I was no longer the one being played. The ballroom dimmed until only the stage glowed beneath the chandeliers. Waiters froze mid-step, conversations hushed, and every camera turned toward Daniel Whitmore as he approached the microphone. The man didn't need a spotlight. It followed him on instinct. "Good evening," Daniel began, his voice calm, the kind that didn't need volume to command attention. "Tonight, we're not just celebrating success. We're honoring courage, the kind that doesn't trend online, the kind that gets up every day and keeps going." I felt Ethan shift beside me, uneasy. Sabrina straightened her posture, ready for attention that wasn't coming her way. Daniel gestured to the large screen behind him. The Whitmore Foundation has spent the past year working with hospitals across the city to expand maternal support. But tonight, I want to do something different. I want to recognize one person whose quiet strength represents everything this gala pretends to celebrate. A murmur rippled through the crowd. He nodded toward the host, who brought out a small black velvet box on a tray. "This," Daniel continued, "isn't an award to be kept. It's a symbol. A contribution that will go toward building a maternal recovery center at New York Presbyterian Hospital. The piece itself is a diamond pendant, 10 times the value of an average gala item, and it will carry one name, Grace Miller." Gasps fluttered through the room like birds startled from a tree. My heart froze. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard right. Sabrina's lips parted in disbelief. Ethan turned to me, face pale. Daniel didn't look at me. He spoke to the room. "Grace doesn't know I planned this. She didn't ask for help, didn't seek attention. She simply did the work, helping women when no one was watching, even when she was the one in pain." The audience turned toward me, phones rising, whispers spreading. I wanted to disappear, but something stronger held me upright. Dignity, maybe, or the baby kicking inside me. The host smiled gently. "Grace, would you join us on stage?" I hesitated. Ethan hissed, "Don't you dare make this about you." But this wasn't about me. It was about truth, and maybe about the universe finally giving me one small moment of justice. I rose. The sound of my heels on the marble floor echoed like heartbeats. As I reached the stage, Daniel stepped aside, offering me space at the microphone. My voice trembled at first. "I don't have fancy words," I began, scanning the crowd of glittering strangers. "But I know what it means to fight quietly, to smile through humiliation, to protect a child when the person who promised to protect you walks away." The room was silent. Even Sabrina's camera stopped recording. "I thought losing a ring meant losing everything," I said softly. "But I learned that the things worth keeping don't shine, they stay." Applause erupted, raw and real. Daniel gave a slight nod, pride without ownership. When I stepped off stage, Sabrina's expression was cracked porcelain. "How long have you been playing this?" she spat. "Playing what?" I asked. "Honesty?" She stormed off, heels striking the marble like fire. Ethan grabbed my arm. "You embarrassed me," he whispered. I pulled away. "No, Ethan, you embarrassed yourself. I just stopped covering for you." Daniel approached quietly, handing me the velvet box. Inside was the pendant, simple, luminous. "It's not a gift," he said. "It's a reminder." My eyes stung. Of what? That your worth was never something he could pawn. The audience began to disperse, laughter and clinking glasses returning to the air. But for me, the night had already changed everything. Because under the chandelier's glow, the man who once broke me stood exposed. And the man who saw me rebuilt me without ever asking for credit. The applause from the gala still echoed in my ears as I stepped out into the corridor behind the ballroom. The sound faded, replaced by the soft hum of air conditioning and the faint smell of champagne. My hands trembled as I held the velvet box, heavy, not because of the diamond, but because of everything it symbolized. I needed air. I slipped away from the crowd, down a hallway lined with gold-framed mirrors and crystal sconces. The reflection staring back at me was someone new. Tired, yes, but not broken. Then I heard his voice. "Grace." Ethan stood a few steps away, his tux jacket unbuttoned, his eyes bloodshot from either shame or alcohol, or both. The charming mask he wore for years had slipped, leaving only the man beneath it, desperate, cornered. "I need to explain," he said, approaching slowly. "Please." I took a breath, grounding myself. "Explain what, Ethan? How you sold your wedding ring?" Or how you watched another man honor me while you stood there pretending you weren't guilty. He winced. I made mistakes, okay? I got in over my head. Sabrina said she could help me. It wasn't love, it was business? I cut in sharply. You use that word like it can disinfect betrayal. He rubbed his face. I didn't know how to stop. Every time I tried, she'd threaten to expose everything. You think I liked living that lie? I looked at him for a long moment. Yes, I said quietly. Because it made you feel important. He fell silent. The hallway lights shimmered off the marble floor, catching the tears I refused to shed. I came here tonight to try to fix things, he whispered. I thought if I stood next to you, people would see we were still something. Something, I repeated, stepping closer. We were everything, until you decided everything wasn't enough. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. The silence between us stretched like a wound that wouldn't close. Grace, I'm broke, he said finally, voice cracking. Sabrina took the last of my money and ran. I don't even have an apartment anymore. The words landed with dull weight. Once, that confession would have shattered me. Now, it only made me sad. You lost more than money, I said. You lost the right to stand beside the woman who carried your child. He flinched. I can change. Maybe, I said, but not with me. Just then, Daniel appeared at the end of the corridor, speaking quietly with his chief of staff, Dean. When his eyes met mine, he hesitated, reading the scene instantly. He didn't rush forward. He waited, letting me handle it, like someone who understood strength didn't need rescue. Ethan followed my gaze, his voice turning bitter. So this is it? You replace me with a billionaire? That's your revenge? I shook my head. No, Ethan. My revenge is peace. He stared at me, chest heaving. For a moment, I thought he might argue. Instead, he turned and walked away, shoulders slumped, disappearing into the noise of the gala. When I turned back, Daniel was there, hands in his pockets. You handled that with grace, he said softly, the irony of my name not lost on either of us. I let out a shaky laugh. I didn't feel graceful. You don't have to feel it, he said. You just have to be it. The hallway fell silent again, the world briefly still. I looked down at the velvet box in my hand, its diamond catching the soft light. I don't want this to be about pity, I said quietly. It isn't, Daniel replied. It's about proof. Proof that something pure can still come from something cruel. I exhaled slowly. Then I'll keep it. Not as a gift, but as a reminder. He nodded. A reminder that no one defines your worth but you. And as we walked back toward the ballroom lights, I realized something powerful. This wasn't just the end of betrayal. It was the beginning of becoming the woman I was always meant to be. And soon, the world, and Ethan, would see just how unstoppable that woman could be. By the time the gala ended, I felt like I'd lived 10 years in one night. Ethan's confession still rang in my head, but the exhaustion had hardened into something else. Clarity. I didn't belong to that world of polished smiles and empty promises anymore. I belonged to survival. The next morning, I woke to sunlight leaking through the blinds of our apartment. Ethan wasn't there. His tux jacket lay crumpled on the chair, smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. I stared at it for a long minute before folding it neatly and setting it by the door. Then I reached for my phone and called Mia. I'm leaving, I said simply. She didn't hesitate. Good, I'll help you pack. Within an hour, she arrived with cardboard boxes and strong coffee. We worked in silence, the kind that hums between people who love each other too much to waste words. I packed baby clothes, prenatal vitamins, ultrasound photos, and my father's old Bible. Everything else could stay. When I opened the drawer of Ethan's desk, I found a stack of unopened bills and a second pawn ticket, this one for his Rolex. My hands shook. He was selling everything except his pride. Mia touched my shoulder. He's drowning, Grace. Don't go down with him. I'm done swimming in his storm, I whispered. We loaded my things into her Toyota and drove to Aunt Patricia's office in Newark. Patricia was waiting with legal documents spread across her desk. We'll file for separation today, she said, adjusting her glasses. You'll retain full control over finances related to the baby. He can contest it later, but he won't win. Her confidence steadied me. Thank you, I said, signing where she pointed. You're doing the right thing, she replied. Sometimes walking away is louder than any argument. By evening, Mia drove me to a small furnished apartment near Central Park West, arranged quietly by Daniel's foundation. It wasn't grand, but it was safe. Pale curtains, a view of treetops, a tiny kitchen that smelled like fresh paint. For the first time in months, I exhaled without fear. There was a knock on the door. Dean, Daniel's chief of staff, stood there holding a folder. "Just some paperwork from the foundation," he said politely. "Rental terms, medical coverage, and a contact for emotional support if needed." "Tell Daniel thank you," I said. "But I'll stand on my own 2 feet soon." Dean smiled. "He already knows." After he left, I wandered the small apartment. I placed a framed sonogram on the nightstand and hung the pendant Daniel had given me on the wall hook beside it. They both glimmered faintly in the lamplight, symbols of loss and survival. Mia stayed the night, sleeping on the couch. We ordered takeout and laughed for the first time in weeks, the kind of laughter that sounds like healing. Around midnight, I sat by the window, notebook open. I started to write everything that had happened, from the missing ring to the pawn ticket to the plaza to the diamond pendant. The pages filled quickly, each word a thread pulling me out of the past. At the top, I wrote the title, Exit Strategy. The city outside pulsed with light, indifferent but alive. Somewhere out there, Ethan was probably blaming me, Sabrina was spinning her story, and Daniel was planning another way to help strangers like me. I closed the notebook, pressing my palm over it. "We're safe now, baby," I whispered. "And safety is the first step to freedom." The radiator clicked, the wind sighed through the trees, and for the first time in months, my world was quiet. But I didn't know that peace would last only a moment, because soon Ethan would come knocking, and this time, he wouldn't come alone. Peace never lasts long when lies are still breathing. 3 mornings after I moved into the new apartment, I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop. Mia was the first call. "Grace, don't panic," she said quickly, "but you need to see what's trending." I opened Instagram and felt my stomach drop. Sabrina Vaughn had gone live at midnight. Her video already had hundreds of thousands of views. Her face filled the screen. Perfect makeup, flawless lighting, crocodile tears. "I never wanted to speak about this publicly," she began, voice trembling just enough to seem real. "But I'm tired of being bullied by a jealous wife who can't let go of her toxic marriage. I was just trying to help Ethan's career, and now she's dragging my name through the mud." She paused, dabbing her eyes with a Dior handkerchief. "I pray for her and her baby. No woman deserves hate, but lies destroy people." The comments exploded. "Pray for Sabrina, jealous wife, fake victim." My chest tightened. Even strangers were calling me names. By the time I reached the end of the video, I could barely breathe. Sabrina had turned my pain into her performance. Mia arrived 20 minutes later holding coffee and fury. "Don't look at the comments. Patricia's already seen it. She's drafting a response." Patricia called seconds later, her voice crisp. "Grace, don't react online. We'll file a formal cease and desist for defamation. Sabrina just handed us proof she's manipulating the narrative. You stay quiet and calm." "Calm?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "She just called me a bully in front of half the internet." "She also called you by name," Patricia said. "That's her mistake." After hanging up, I tried to distract myself. I rocked in the chair by the window, holding my belly as my son kicked gently, as if to remind me I wasn't alone. I whispered, "You're my reason, not my ruin." That afternoon, Daniel called. "I saw the video," he said quietly. "You don't need to defend yourself. People who live on spectacle burn in their own spotlight." I swallowed hard. "It hurts, Daniel. Everyone believes her." "They won't for long," he said. "Truth is patient. It waits until the noise gets tired." I wanted to believe him. By evening, another video appeared. Ethan beside Sabrina, the two of them sitting close on a white couch, pretending to be saints. "We're just asking for privacy," Ethan said, hand on his knee. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "This has been taken out of context." Mia gasped. "He's really doing this? He's siding with her online?" I nodded, numb. "He's already sold everything else. Why not his dignity too?" That night, the online storm raged. Journalists reposted clips, gossip pages speculated about the pregnant ex-wife of the marketing exec. My name trended for all the wrong reasons. Around midnight, I got a text from Daniel. "Ignore it. My PR team is preparing a statement highlighting your hospital work. Truth, not gossip." The next morning, photos of me at the gala began circulating. Headlines read, "Unsung Hero Honored by Billionaire Philanthropist." Daniel's statement praised the bravery of mothers who stand tall in adversity. My inbox filled with messages of support from women I'd never met, nurses, single moms, strangers saying they saw themselves in me. For the first time in weeks, the noise turned into something else: empathy. Mia smiled through tears. "You just won the narrative back, Grace." I wasn't celebrating yet. "Let her talk," I said quietly. "Every word she spins is another thread she'll hang herself with." I picked up my notebook and wrote one line across a blank page. When truth takes its time, it hits twice as hard. And I didn't know it yet, but Sabrina's spotlight was about to burn her entire facade to ashes, live for the whole world to see. By the following week, the noise online had finally started to fade. The cruel comments turned into curious ones, then into quiet support. But while the internet moved on, I hadn't. I was still rebuilding piece by piece, trying to remember what it felt like to be more than someone's scandal. That's when Daniel called. "Grace, are you free tomorrow morning?" "I think so." "Why?" "There's a hospital board meeting," he said. "They're planning a community expansion, and I'd like you there. You've been on the ground. You understand the real needs. They need to hear that voice." I hesitated. "You want me in a boardroom? I don't even own a blazer." He chuckled softly. "Just bring your honesty. It's rarer than any blazer in the room." The next morning, I dressed in the simplest outfit I had: black pants, cream blouse, hair pulled into a bun. As I entered the sleek glass tower on Park Avenue, I felt the old anxiety crawl up my spine. These were the kinds of rooms Ethan had always worshipped, the kind he'd sell a ring just to belong to. The receptionist smiled. "Mr. Whitmore is expecting you, Mrs. Cole." That name still stung, but I forced a polite nod. The boardroom smelled faintly of espresso and ambition. Around the long oak table sat hospital executives and donors, all polished and pressed. Daniel stood at the head, calm as ever, wearing a dark gray suit that fit like command itself. When he saw me, his expression softened. "Everyone, this is Grace Miller," he said. "She's worked directly with patients in our outreach programs. She'll be sharing real insight on what our funding actually does." A few skeptical eyes turned my way. I took a deep breath and began, my hands resting on the table's edge. "Sometimes what people need isn't new equipment or glossy campaigns," I said. "Sometimes it's bus fare to make it to an appointment, or a nurse who doesn't judge them when they say they can't afford formula this week." The room quieted. I continued, voice steadier. "You can build 10 more rooms in a hospital, but if you don't build trust, you're just stacking walls." When I finished, there was silence. Then Daniel spoke. "That's exactly what I wanted them to hear." The chairman nodded slowly. "She's right. We need mobile clinics. Real reach." As they discussed logistics, Dean, Daniel's chief of staff, slid a discreet folder toward me. Inside were printed documents, emails, bank statements. I glanced up, confused. Dean whispered, "Proof of financial misconduct. Ethan's name is on several transfers linked to Sabrina's influencer contracts. They used client funds for personal expenses." My breath caught. "You mean?" "It's enough to end his career," Dean said quietly. "Patricia should see this." I nodded, tucking the folder into my bag. When the meeting ended, Daniel walked me to the elevator. "You handled yourself with strength," he said. "You didn't speak like someone wounded. You spoke like someone leading." I smiled faintly. "That's new for me." "No," he said. "It's always been there. You just stopped apologizing for it." As the elevator doors opened, I turned to him. "Why are you doing this, Daniel? Not just for me, for all of this." He paused. "Because people once looked away when my sister needed help. I promised I never would again." The doors closed, leaving me staring at my reflection in the mirrored walls. I didn't look like Ethan's wife anymore. I looked like the woman who'd finally stepped out of his shadow. When I got home, I placed the folder on the table beside the pendant. The evidence inside would expose them both, Sabrina and Ethan. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the fight ahead. I was ready to finish it. The folder sat on my kitchen table for 2 days before I could bring myself to open it again. Every time I looked at it, my stomach twisted, the final proof of Ethan's lies. But the truth doesn't get weaker by being ignored. It waits. On the 3rd morning, I called Patricia. "I have something you need to see." She arrived within the hour, her presence as sharp and grounding as always. I slid the folder toward her. She flipped through the pages, her expression tightening with every line. "Misappropriated funds," she muttered. Client money funneled into influencer promotions. That's embezzlement, Grace. Your husband's looking at serious charges if the agency decides to press. I felt no satisfaction, only a dull ache. He brought this on himself, she nodded. And you? You stay quiet, stay steady. We'll use this for custody leverage, not revenge. That night, Ethan called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was frantic. Grace, listen, I need to talk. Please. Everything's falling apart. I know, I said softly. I saw the paperwork. There was silence on the line, then a sharp intake of breath. You don't understand, they suspended me. Sabrina's threatening to sue me for damages if I talk. Talk about what? The money, he said. She told me it was legal. She said she had investors. Now everyone's blaming me. My grip tightened on the phone. You made your choices, Ethan. I was trying to save us, he shouted. I laughed bitterly. You don't save a marriage by selling its ring. He went quiet again. Please, Grace, I'm sorry. I closed my eyes, exhaustion rolling over me. Sorry doesn't raise a child. Then I hung up. An hour later, the building intercom buzzed. Mia was on her way up. When I opened the door, she stepped in with takeout, and that look she wore when bad news followed her. Don't freak out, she said, but Ethan showed up at the hospital today. He was yelling in the parking lot, trying to find you. My pulse spiked. What did he want? He said he needed money. The staff called security before it got ugly. Grace, he's unraveling. I sat down, shaking. He's dangerous now, Mia. Not violent maybe, but desperate. Desperation breaks people. Mia knelt beside me. Then we get ahead of it. You call Daniel, let him know what's happening. He can tighten security at the foundation. No, I said quickly. He's done enough. I can handle this. But that night, as I lay awake listening to the city hum outside, I realized how foolish that sounded. The truth might protect me legally, but desperation had no rules. The next morning, my phone buzzed again, Daniel's name flashing across the screen. Mia told me about Ethan, he said gently. You're not safe if he's showing up unannounced. I'll send Dean to check on the building. I don't want to be a burden, I said. You're not, Daniel replied. You're someone who's been through enough storms. Let someone else hold the umbrella for once. His words settled over me like a blanket. For the first time, I didn't argue. That evening, I sat by the window, watching the last light fade behind the Manhattan skyline. The city looked almost peaceful, like it didn't know my life was cracking again. I placed my hand over my belly. We're close, little one, I whispered. Just a few more weeks. But deep down, I knew the final confrontation was coming. The truth was out there now, and men like Ethan don't go quietly when the lies start to die. And somewhere between fear and resolve, I decided, if he came for chaos again, he'd find a woman who no longer trembled. It happened on a Thursday night, 3 weeks before my due date. The sky was bruised purple, rain whispering against the windows, and I was finally drifting to sleep when a sharp pain sliced through my abdomen. For a moment I thought it was a cramp. Then another wave hit, stronger, deeper. I gasped, clutching my belly. No, not yet, I whispered. Please, not yet. Another contraction rolled through me, and instinct took over. I grabbed my phone, trembling, and called Mia. She answered on the first ring. Grace? I think it's time, I panted. I'm on my way. Don't move. The next 30 minutes were a blur. Mia arrived soaked from the rain, her scrubs half untucked, her eyes all business. She helped me into my coat, murmuring steady words. Breathe, Grace. Just breathe. We're going to New York Presbyterian. You're safe. The city blurred by through the rain-smeared car window, neon signs, taxis, puddles swallowing reflections. I counted each contraction under my breath. 5 minutes apart, Mia noted, voice tight. When we reached the hospital, the world narrowed to bright lights, voices, the rhythmic beep of monitors. A nurse led me into a delivery room while Mia filled out forms. Any support person? The nurse asked gently. I hesitated, breath hitching. Just her, I said, nodding toward Mia. But an hour later, as I gripped the rails of the bed, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Daniel. He was in a dark coat, rain clinging to his shoulders, eyes steady but full of concern. Mia called me, he said quietly. I can wait outside if you'd prefer. Tears sprang to my eyes. No, I managed. Stay. He moved closer, not too near, just enough for me to feel his presence anchoring the chaos. You're stronger than you think, he said softly. Hours blurred together. The contractions grew merciless. I screamed, cried, prayed. Mia wiped sweat from my forehead while Daniel stood near the window, jaw clenched, powerless but unwavering. At dawn, the doctor said it was time. I pushed through pain that tore through every part of me, through exhaustion so deep it felt endless. Then a cry split the air, a high, raw sound, the sound of life. The world went still. "It's a boy," the nurse said, smiling. She placed him on my chest, my son, my Aaron. Tiny, red-faced, perfect. I wept, shaking, laughter tangled with sobs. "Hi, baby," I whispered. "We did it." Mia squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He's beautiful, Grace." Daniel stayed quiet, watching from the corner, eyes glistening with something deeper than words. When the nurse stepped out, he approached carefully, as though afraid to break the moment. "Congratulations," he said softly. "You did this alone." I shook my head weakly. "No, I had help." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's what strength really looks like, knowing when to let someone stand beside you." For a while, the room was silent, except for Aaron's soft breaths. Outside, the storm had passed. Later, while Mia went to get food, the nurse handed me my phone. Dozens of missed calls from Ethan. I ignored them. He didn't deserve this moment. Daniel lingered near the window. "Do you need anything?" he asked. I looked down at Aaron, wrapped snugly in the hospital blanket, his tiny fingers curled around mine. "Everything I need is right here." He nodded, eyes warm. "Then rest. You've earned peace." As he turned to leave, I called after him. "Daniel?" He paused in the doorway. "Thank you for showing up when no one else did." He smiled, small and genuine. "That's what decent people do, Grace. They show up." When he left, I kissed Aaron's forehead. His heartbeat was strong, steady, just like mine had become. And as the morning light poured in, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of every reason I'd ever needed to keep fighting. The world felt different after Aaron was born. The hospital room was quiet, warm, filled with the steady rhythm of his tiny breaths. Every time I looked at him, I felt something shift inside me, like the past was dissolving, one heartbeat at a time. For 2 days, I lived in that peace. Mia brought flowers and coffee, nurses came and went with soft smiles. Daniel stopped by once, bringing a small stuffed bear and a handwritten note. "If you ever need anything, supplies, advice, or silence, call." I didn't call. I didn't need saving anymore. But peace, I was learning, doesn't last forever. On the third morning, Patricia arrived with a folder. She sat on the edge of my bed, her heels clicking against the tile. "Ethan's lawyer reached out," she said. "He's filing for joint custody." I froze. "Joint? He hasn't even met Aaron." "I know, but he's desperate. He's broke, his agency suspended him, and Sabrina's gone. She wiped the joint account clean." My stomach tightened. "So now he wants my son as collateral?" Patricia sighed. "He's going to spin this as an attempt to rebuild his family. But don't worry, we'll counter. I've already filed an emergency motion for temporary sole custody. Judges don't like unstable fathers with public scandals." I looked down at Aaron, sleeping peacefully in his bassinet. "I just want to protect him." "And you will," she said, squeezing my hand. "But we'll need to show stability, income, housing, community support." That night, when the hospital discharged me, Daniel's driver appeared downstairs. "Mr. Whitmore wanted to make sure you got home safely," the man said, loading my bags into the car. I was too tired to argue. The ride was quiet, the city glimmering outside the window like a world I no longer recognized. When we reached my apartment, Daniel himself was waiting by the door. Sleeves rolled up, no trace of the billionaire persona, just a man holding 2 grocery bags. "You didn't have to," I said. "I wanted to," he replied. "You just gave birth, Grace. You shouldn't come home to an empty fridge." He unpacked soup, fruit, tea, even diapers. Everything practical, nothing extravagant. It was the kind of care that didn't need applause. As he worked, Aaron stirred in my arms. Daniel smiled softly. "He looks like you." I laughed quietly. "Poor kid." "Lucky kid," he said. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't need filling. Finally, I spoke. "Ethan's trying to take custody." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He won't succeed. Patricia's the best in the state, and you have evidence of his fraud. If you need anything, legal counsel, financial backing, say the word." I shook my head. "I need to fight this myself. I can't keep letting men fix what other men broke." He nodded. "Then I'll just stand behind you while you do." The next few weeks blurred into a rhythm of motherhood and paperwork. Feedings, diapers, court forms, sleepless nights. Mia visited every day, her laughter filling the apartment. Patricia handled filings like a general preparing for war. Sabrina vanished from the public eye. Rumors swirled. Lawsuits, unpaid sponsors, disappearing brand deals. Ethan's name appeared in a leaked memo about agency misconduct. His empire of illusion was crumbling piece by piece. Still, the fear lingered. I knew he wouldn't let go quietly. One night, as I rocked Aaron to sleep, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You ruined my life. I hope you're happy." I deleted it without replying. Happiness wasn't something he could touch anymore. I kissed Aaron's forehead and whispered, "We're okay, baby. We have everything we need." Then I looked out the window, the city glowing beneath me, and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Control. Because no matter what storm came next, I finally knew how to stand in the rain without drowning. The courthouse on Center Street smelled like paper, nerves, and too many stories ending the same way. I stood outside the family courtroom holding Aaron against my shoulder, his tiny breath steady while mine stumbled. Patricia adjusted her glasses beside me, calm and sharp as ever. "Remember," she said, "speak only when asked. You're not here to prove you're perfect, just that you're stable, grounded, and honest." Honest. The one thing I'd always been, even when it cost me everything. Inside, Ethan sat at the petitioner's table, wearing a cheap suit and a new haircut that couldn't disguise the exhaustion carved into his face. He looked up when I entered. For a second, the old softness flickered in his eyes, then vanished. He'd come to win, not to reconcile. Sabrina wasn't there. I learned she'd fled Los Angeles after a failed sponsorship scandal, but her ghost hovered in the room, whispering through every rumor Ethan's lawyer would use to twist my story. The judge, a silver-haired woman with kind but piercing eyes, took her seat. "We're here regarding custody of minor child Aaron Cole," she began. "Mr. and Mrs. Cole, I understand emotions are high, but this is about the child's best interest. Let's proceed." Ethan's lawyer went first, a tall man with the slick confidence of someone paid by desperation. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges past mistakes," he began smoothly. "He seeks joint custody to be a consistent presence in his son's life. He's working to rebuild financially and emotionally." He presented documents, therapy appointments, temporary housing receipts, even a letter from Ethan's mother claiming he was committed to family restoration. Patricia leaned over to me and whispered, "Smoke and mirrors. Let him talk." When it was our turn, she stood, voice steady as stone. "Your Honor, my client has provided complete documentation of her stability. Residence, employment at the hospital's outreach program, and full-time caregiving. We also have evidence of Mr. Cole's ongoing financial misconduct, confirmed by his former employer." She handed the folder to the clerk. The judge skimmed the contents, her expression tightening. "This shows misappropriation of client funds?" Patricia nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Funds used to finance the lifestyle of an influencer, including personal purchases, under false expense codes. That influencer has since gone bankrupt." Ethan's lawyer objected, claiming irrelevant personal context. The judge silenced him with a look. "Fraud is not irrelevant when discussing parental responsibility." Ethan shifted in his seat, jaw tight. "It wasn't like that," he muttered. Patricia pressed on. "Mrs. Cole has not sought financial damages, only protection for her child. She's maintained independence, paid her own bills, and refused external handouts." At that, Ethan's lawyer smirked. "External handouts? You mean from Mr. Whitmore?" The room froze. Patricia's tone didn't waver. "Mr. Whitmore's foundation supports hospital initiatives, not individuals. Any interaction between him and my client is strictly professional and documented. Unlike my opposing counsel's client, she has nothing to hide." Ethan's eyes burned into mine, but I didn't flinch. I had spent too long being small. Today, I stood tall. When it was my turn to speak, the judge asked softly, "Mrs. Cole, do you have anything to say?" I took a breath. "Your Honor, I'm not here to punish Aaron's father. I'm here to protect my son. I want him to grow up knowing love, not chaos. If Ethan can truly be that someday, I won't stand in the way. But right now, stability lives with me." The judge nodded, eyes softening. "Thank you." After what felt like hours, she delivered her ruling. Temporary sole custody to me, supervised visitation for Ethan, mandatory counseling, and financial transparency before any changes. It was over. Ethan slumped in his chair. For once, there was no arrogance, no performance, just a man realizing the cost of his own decisions. Outside, the sun hit the courthouse steps. Daniel was waiting across the street, holding 2 paper cups of soup. He didn't say a word, just handed me one and smiled. And in that small act of quiet kindness, I felt something close to justice. Because the court hadn't just given me custody of Aaron, it had given me back custody of my life. A month after the custody ruling, the city began to feel like home again. The chaos had quieted, the noise of betrayal fading into background hums of traffic and baby laughter. Aaron was sleeping through most nights now, his tiny fist curled around my finger, as if anchoring me to this new peace I'd fought so hard for. Then one morning, my phone buzzed with an email from the New York Ledger. The subject line made my stomach twist. Feature request. The strength of modern motherhood. The reporter, a woman named Lila Torres, explained she'd attended the hospital gala weeks earlier and had followed the story since. "We want to tell it right," she wrote. "No scandal, no gossip, just truth." I hesitated. My life had already been consumed by other people's versions of my story. Did I really want to open the door again? But Daniel encouraged me gently. "If the truth is going to live somewhere," he said, "it should live in your own words." So I agreed. The interview took place at a small cafe overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. Lila arrived with a notebook and the kind of empathy that doesn't need to be said out loud. She asked about the betrayal, the baby, the court. I told her everything, quietly, plainly, without tears. "It's not about revenge," I said. "It's about remembering that pain doesn't define you unless you let it." She smiled. "That's your headline." The article went live a week later. Grace Miller, the woman who chose dignity over drama. It spread faster than I could have imagined, not because of scandal, but because it spoke to something deeper. Messages poured in from women across the country, single mothers, divorcees, caregivers. They thanked me for saying what they couldn't, that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. One message stopped me cold. "You don't know me, but your story saved me. I was about to give up. Now I'm not." That night, I sat by the window, watching the lights on the bridge shimmer across the water. For the first time, I didn't feel like the woman left behind. I felt like someone building forward. Meanwhile, Daniel's foundation expanded the maternal outreach program. The press connected the dots, calling it the Whitmore Initiative for Mothers, and used my photo from the gala as the unofficial emblem. I never asked for the spotlight, but if it helped other women, I could bear it. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony near the River Cafe, I wore a simple white dress and carried Aaron in my arms. Cameras flashed, but I wasn't nervous. Daniel stood beside me, steady and silent, letting me speak first. I thought losing everything would break me. I said into the microphone, "But sometimes life clears the rubble so you can see what's solid." The applause felt different this time, not polite, but genuine. Daniel leaned toward me afterward. "You realize you're changing lives now, right?" I smiled. "I'm just surviving out loud." Across town, Ethan's scandal resurfaced when the agency released its internal audit. He avoided jail time but lost his license and reputation. He sent one short message through Patricia's office. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're happy." I didn't reply. Some things don't need answers. That evening, Daniel invited me and Aaron to a quiet dinner at the River Cafe. No cameras, no gala gowns, just 2 adults, a baby, and a table by the window. As we watched the Manhattan skyline shimmer, Daniel said softly, "You know, every time people talk about diamonds, they forget how much pressure it takes to make one." I looked at him, smiling through tears. "Maybe that's the point." He nodded. "Maybe you were always the diamond." And as the city glowed across the river, I realized the truth had finally set me free, because this time, it belonged to me. Winter loosened its grip on the city. The air smelled faintly of thawed earth and possibility. Aaron was 6 months old now, curious, chubby, always reaching for light. Most mornings I pushed his stroller through Central Park, coffee in one hand, peace in the other. The world had slowed into something livable. One Tuesday, as we crossed the park's stone bridge, I spotted a familiar figure waiting near the benches. Daniel, dressed simply in a gray sweater and jeans, no trace of the billionaire armor he wore in public. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, smiling. "I texted Mia for your schedule. She said this is your walking hour." I laughed. "She's terrible at keeping secrets." He nodded toward the stroller. "May I?" I stepped aside as he bent down, grinning at Aaron. The baby blinked, then giggled. A rare, bubbling laugh that made Daniel's entire face soften. "He's got your courage," he said. We walked for a while, silence comfortable between us. The park shimmered under early sunlight, couples walking dogs, kids chasing pigeons. For the first time, the city didn't feel like a battlefield. Finally, Daniel said, "The foundation's expanding again. We're setting up parenting workshops in Queens, nutrition programs, legal aid. Heck, I wanted to ask if you'd consider leading one of the sessions." "Me?" I blinked. "I'm not exactly an expert." "You lived it," he said simply. "That's the kind of expertise people actually listen to." I smiled, pushing the stroller gently. "You really think anyone wants advice from a woman who rebuilt her life with baby formula and willpower?" He looked at me then, eyes steady. "Grace, people don't follow perfection. They follow proof that survival is possible." His words settled into me, warm and certain. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll do it." We reached a bench near the fountain. Daniel opened a paper bag and began pulling out small things: diapers, formula samples, a few prepaid transit cards, grocery vouchers. "These are for the group tomorrow," he explained. "Practical help, not speeches." I laughed. "You brought a care package to a park? You really can't turn it off, can you?" He shrugged, smiling. "I'm just trying to be useful." As he spoke, a gust of wind carried away one of the vouchers. I grabbed it before it flew into the water, laughing breathlessly. "Still saving your projects, apparently." "Or maybe you're saving mine," he said quietly. Our eyes met for a moment longer than they should have. There was no grand music, no sweeping confession, just two people who understood the language of rebuilding. We sat for a while watching Aaron wave his arms at passing ducks. Then Daniel spoke again, his tone softer. "Can I tell you something I've never said out loud?" "Of course." He exhaled slowly. "I lost my sister because I thought money could fix everything. I learned too late that presence matters more than power. Since then, I've made sure no one faces what she did, especially women like you." I reached over, touched his hand lightly. "You did more than fix it, Daniel. You changed the story." He looked at me, eyes bright. "Maybe we both did." Before we left, he handed me an envelope, plain, unmarked. "It's not charity," he said quickly. "It's an opportunity, a partnership proposal for the outreach program. Read it when you're ready." I slipped it into my bag. "Thank you." As we parted ways, Aaron reached out toward Daniel, fingers open. Daniel let the tiny hand close around one of his fingers, smiling softly. "See you soon, little man." That evening, I opened the envelope. Inside was a proposal titled The Miller-Whitmore Project, Empowering Mothers to Begin Again. I pressed a hand to my heart, tears blurring the words. Because for the first time, the future didn't feel like something I had to survive. It felt like something I could build. The year passed. Spring returned to New York with the same stubborn beauty it always had. Dogwoods blooming along Central Park West, the air smelling faintly of rain and renewal. Aaron had learned to walk, his laughter echoing through the apartment like sunlight you could hear. I'd learned to breathe again, fully and freely. That morning, I stood before a mirror, adjusting a navy blazer over a white blouse. The reflection staring back wasn't the woman who once begged for love from a man who had none to give. She was someone rebuilt, scarred, yes, but standing tall. Today was the official launch of the Miller-Whitmore Project. The event was being held at the same ballroom where my humiliation once played out, the Plaza. But this time, the lights belonged to me. I arrived early with Mia, who now managed the outreach program. She was radiant, busy giving directions to volunteers. "You ready for your big speech?" she teased. I smiled, smoothing Aaron's curls as he toddled beside me. Ready to tell the truth. Reporters were already gathering, cameras flashing, but the energy was different now. Respectful, not invasive. The banner above the stage read, "Empowering Mothers to Begin Again." Beneath it, photos of real women, nurses, single moms, survivors, lined the walls. It wasn't about pity. It was about proof. Daniel arrived a few minutes later, wearing his usual calm-like armor. He carried a folder under one arm and a bouquet of white lilies in the other. "For the woman who turned rock bottom into a foundation," he said with a quiet grin. I laughed softly. "You always know what to say," he shrugged. "It's easy when it's true." When it was time to speak, I stepped onto the stage. The crowd quieted. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of memory. The first time I stood in that very room, watching my husband clasp another woman's wrist with a diamond that wasn't meant for her. But the ache no longer burned. It had become fuel. 2 years ago, I walked into this ballroom and lost my faith in people. But life has a way of rewriting its own scripts when you refuse to end the story on someone else's terms. I looked down at Aaron, sitting in Mia's lap, smiling up at me. I thought my child was the reason I had to stay silent. He became the reason I finally spoke. Applause rippled through the room. I continued, voice steady. The Miller Whitmore Project isn't about money or charity. It's about giving women what I needed most: dignity, choices, and the courage to start again. Because healing isn't about forgetting. It's about turning pain into purpose. The applause swelled again, standing this time. Daniel joined me on stage, shaking my hand before the cameras. "You built this, Grace," he said quietly. "I just made room for it." "Then let's keep building," I replied. Later, as the guests mingled, I stepped onto the balcony overlooking Fifth Avenue. The city stretched below, alive and endless. Daniel joined me, resting his elbows on the railing. "You ever think about what would have happened if none of this started the way it did?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Then I wouldn't have learned who I was without him." He nodded, eyes soft. "And who is that?" "A woman who doesn't need saving, but isn't afraid to let someone walk beside her." He smiled, quiet and genuine. "I'd like that." Inside, Aaron began to fuss, reaching toward me. I scooped him up, pressing a kiss to his forehead. The cameras flashed behind us, but for once I didn't care. This moment wasn't for headlines. It was for me, for every woman who'd ever been broken and still found a way to rise. As I turned to leave, the diamond pendant Daniel had given me caught the afternoon light, scattering reflections across the walls of the plaza. And for the first time in forever, I realized that I wasn't just wearing a symbol of worth. I had become it. So that's how our story ends. But if you're still here, my friend, still watching, still feeling something, then maybe a part of Grace's journey has quietly touched your heart too. Maybe it reminded you that even the deepest betrayal can become the soil for new beginnings. As Marcus Aurelius once said, what stands in the way becomes the way. Every heartbreak, every loss, every fall is just the universe's way of shaping us into someone stronger, softer, wiser. Grace's story isn't just about revenge or pain. It's about healing. It's about finding your worth when the world tries to sell it cheap. It's proof that peace doesn't come from people who hurt you. It comes from the moment you decide that they no longer control your happiness. So if you're going through something right now, remember this: you're not broken, you're becoming. And when you rise, do it with grace. If this story spoke to you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe so we can keep walking through stories that heal together. Because healing starts right here with us.